Yeah. Well, tell me, what was the transition like for you guys from going from a hospital to a home birth? Like, is that something like how'd y'all talk about it and make that decision?
It was a pretty long process. We have always been exposed to sort of less hospital centric ideas about birth. I think we watched the Ricky Lake documentary before
Mm-hmm.
we ever got pregnant, even the first time, Business of Birth, I think it is, or Business of Being Born.
Yeah.
And then for our first, during Hank's pregnancy, we took Bradley classes. Bradley birth classes. And so, and probably 2/3 of the people there were planning on birth center or home birth. So we already knew about that. My partner has a master's degree in maternal and child health education and public health. So, she has a pretty good understanding of how things work, how things are done, and the options that exist.
Yeah.
And so the first time we took this Bradley class, we had all these plans for relaxing and being ready for a long labor, really settling in at home for a while, going to the hospital sort of at the last minute, or not going before we needed to, I guess. And then what ended up happening was she went into labor at 4 a.m. Her water broke pretty suddenly and urgently is not the right word, but with force.
Right.
Things started very quickly, very, very strongly. And, we were again prepared for, the typical 12 to 18 hour, pre-labor situation. And so, she told me to stay asleep until about 7:30. Then she said, we need to go to the hospital. So we, got up, went to the hospital. And then from there on, I was essentially just running logistics, getting us checked in and settled in the room. And then I think we were in the room maybe an hour. Let's see, he was born at 1:19, I think. So, we weren't in the room very long. Oh no, we were in the room longer than an hour. We weren't at the hospital very long before it was time to push and the baby came. And she had intended to have a fully natural birth with no epidural. And, we were at the hospital where it's easily accessible and they offer it to you. And so she opted for that, and which, it's not a bad thing. That's what she chose, but it wasn't what we had planned on. So then, with Louie, the second baby, it was a little bit different. It didn't start as labor didn't start as aggressively. Again, it was about 7 a.m. I think we were getting up with Hank and on a Saturday morning, and she called me to the bathroom, and her water had broken, and I didn't really believe it because he was 2 weeks early, and Hank actually came on his due date. So we weren't even close to expecting the baby to come that quickly or that soon, and we found ourselves 2 weeks ahead. We hadn't even gotten our birth bag ready, like our hospital bag, that stuff ready yet. Had kind of waited to the last minute. And so we took our time. Things started much slower this time. And we, took Hank out to breakfast at IHOP. And probably about the time they delivered our food, she said, we got to get this to go and drop Hank off with the babysitter because we were waiting on her parents to get to town to watch him, and went to the hospital, made it there around 11, and he came later that afternoon. But again, once we got to the hospital, I was the logistics person. And, it was very similar from that point. She got an epidural that time. But, good delivery, everything was great. Big baby, there were 9/9 and 9/13 respectively. But then with our third, she at one point before Lou was born kind of, I believe, mentioned maybe wanting to have a home birth in the future. And at the time, I didn't know anything about home birth really. And I said, "Oh, that sounds crazy. You don't want to do that. It's dangerous."
Yeah.
But then she really, really seriously brought it up with our third. We had some conversations about it, and I was still kind of on the fence, and I said, well, can not convince me, but I was like, well, can I see like what's the evidence out there and that sort of thing. And, she again has a master's degree in health education, so she was able to pull lots of some journal articles I think were thrown around.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you would like the evidence? Okay.
Yeah, and she showed me the midwives that work in our area and kind of told me about their histories and that sort of thing, and then kind of pointed out that responsible CPMs or certified nurse midwives don't deliver home birth babies with at-risk moms generally. Right. And, that made me feel better. And several of the ones in our sort of the greater region where we live are worked in birth centers. All of them, I think, had 10, 15 years experience. Some of them may have, I think, worked in hospitals or OB's offices. So they're not, these aren't just lay midwives that she's finding on the internet. These are people who, with legitimate businesses, that know what they're doing and don't take risks, essentially. And that is really what I was worried about. There's always risk with any birth, but I think honestly, there's probably, if you're not an at-risk, if you're not an at-risk person who's giving birth, there's still risk, and probably more so in a hospital, I would think, as far as infection and that sort of thing.
Right.
So at that point I said, okay, let's do it. And, we were both really happy with how things turned out. I mean, once we got through all the pre-labor visits and education and all that stuff, we were really excited and ready to go. And the birth went off without a hitch. We thought it was going to take long. At one point, it seemed like things weren't progressing as well as we wanted. And I stepped out of the room for a moment, and I heard them call, "Come back, she's feeling pushy." And I came in, and moments later, the baby was born. So, but the whole time leading up to that, I wasn't dealing with logistics. I was able to be present. We were in our own space. She felt she wasn't having to change locations and get in a car and ride on bumpy roads in the middle of contractions and all that kind of stuff, which slows labor down because it's, kicks in your fight or flight responses and all that kind of thing. Yeah. So that was a really long-winded answer, but
that was a good one. There's some good stuff to unpack in there, though.